Okay, so the topic that I am going to talk about is creating Android apps using the processing environment. Okay, so what is processing? Processing is a programming language, a development environment, and an online community. It was developed in the MIT Media Lab by Casey Rees and Benjamin Fry. And at the time, their main goal was to promote literacy within the visual arts and to teach programming fundamentals within a visual context. Developed for educational purposes, processing quickly grew into a worldwide tool used not only by students and professors but by industry professionals. Processing enabled artists to use programming to create incredible visual artifacts. Processing is widely used among high schools and universities for educational purposes. The use of it can be found in almost every art school or visual arts program. Processing is a great tool for education, but with such a large open source community, it quickly grew into a tool that is used by thousands of professionals, such as visual designers, artists, and architects. To name just a few professional uses, processing is used to create projected stage designs for dance and music performances. It was used to create numerous projects that are featured in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And just to show an example, I will show you a very short video of a generative logo that MIT created for their media lab using processing, and it's visually pretty cool and very simple to create. Okay, and I think it was on the 47th second. And back to the slideshow. Like I said, that was created using processing. So why would someone want to use processing? It is one of the best alternatives to proprietary software tools that have either restrictive or very expensive licenses. Processing is completely free. It is very easily accessible to schools and individual students looking to learn quickly. It is open source and supports a very large community and encourages collaboration from everyone. There have already been over 100 libraries written to help the programmer create something unique and complex. With the use of libraries, it makes it easier to take advantage of different aspects such as computer vision, music composition, 3D file exporting, and much more. Processing makes it very easy to create visually pleasing and interesting prototypes. Okay, so I will explain some basics about the processing environment, and what that incorporates is a text editor, a compiler, and a display window. And the text editor you can see here on the left, it is the tool that you use to write your code. And by clicking the little play button on the top left corner, you can compile and run your code. After it gets compiled, your program appears in a new display window. In the text editor, the first function that you see is setup. This is where you initialize all your variables and default parameters. And next is the draw function, and this function runs in an infinite loop, meaning that it keeps redrawing everything on the display window based on the code inside the function. And so with the use of libraries and tools, we can greatly extend the core processing capabilities. It makes it easier for us to, for example, play and manipulate sounds or create advanced geometric three-dimensional shapes and etc. So what does all this have to do with creating Android apps? Processing has an option to change programming modes which allow you to run your apps on an Android device. By using this feature and libraries that are written by processing enthusiasts, we can create Android apps that utilize networking, sensors, Bluetooth, and much more. On the left here is a screenshot from my Android device of an example app that came with a library that I downloaded. This library greatly simplifies and helps the programmer utilize the Bluetooth features of an Android device. You can see that it has listed all the devices that I'm paired with, and if I click C, I can connect to any of them. So, like I said before, processing has an ability to change between modes, and the main mode that it comes with by default is Java mode. It is used to create Java applets of various kinds. They can be very simple or very complex, and I will show you some of the examples so you can get an idea of how powerful of a tool processing actually is. And the first example I want to show you is this mouse 2D, which is pretty cool. it kind of creates a three-dimensional illusion by rotating the mouse, and it's pretty much just, it seems like the rectangles are rotating around each other. And this is all the code that you would need to write in order to make that happen. As you can see, it's not much. Let me show you another example, maybe with 3 dimensions, perspective. This utilizes the camera aspect of processing, and as you can see, we can zoom in and out and rotate these 3D shapes. And again, this is all the code that you would need to write in order to make this happen. And maybe I'll show you another example with lighting. Let's see, directional lighting. And you can see wherever I move my mouse, the lighting changes. And again, this is all the code that you would need to make that happen. So back to my presentation. There are a few other modes that you can download, such as CoffeeScript, JavaScript, and Android modes, but I am only focusing on Android mode in this presentation. So the primary goal of Android mode is to make it very easy to create Android apps. The really cool part about this is that you don't need to learn new code or learn a different syntax. The syntax is virtually the same when switching between modes. That is, if you already know processing. For example, you can write an entire app in Java mode, test it on your computer, switch it to Android mode, change only a few lines of code, and run it on your device. In order for Android mode to work properly, however, of course, you need to have all the proper Android developer tools, such as the Android SDK and things like that. So I created a simple Hello Android app so that you guys can see what I've been talking about. And on the left is the code. And you can see that with just a few lines of code, I can create a simple app that runs on my device. Inside the setup function, the first line of code is a function that sets the orientation of your device. And if you don't do that, I think it defaults to portrait. And then next is setting the background color, which I did to Android green. And then we set the size of the text, and finally the way that the text will be aligned. All of this was placed in the setup function because we want all these settings to be true when the app starts. Now inside the draw function, we call the function fill, which sets the color of the items to be drawn, and then call the text function, which draws the text onto the screen. That is all you need to make a Hello Android app, which is only a few lines of code. Now to make it a little cooler, we can add a little bit of functionality. If you uncomment the last function, it will enable the user to drag the text around the screen. All that was needed was a few more lines of code, as you can see. And mouse dragged is an event handler that gets called whenever the user drags their finger across the screen. Here is, I created another app just to show you how to make use of a button or how to create your own custom button. So here on the left I have a class called button, and I have a constructor that initializes all the parameters, and then I have a function called place. This is the function that actually draws the button onto the screen. And then I have a function called ifClicked, and that checks whether the mouse position is within the bounds of the button and returns true or false. And so here on the right you can see in my setup I initialize my button, and then in my draw function here I have my button.place, which actually draws the button, and then I check if my button is clicked, I increment the counter, and then I draw the counter. And here these are two event handlers. One is mouse pressed. This gets called whenever a user touches the screen, and so whenever the user touches the screen I check if the position is within the bounds of the button, and if it is, that means the button was clicked, and I mark that parameter true. And then once the finger is released from the screen, then the button is obviously unclicked. And this is what the app looks like, the screenshot of my phone. And so for my final demo, what I have done, I'm sure you guys know the game Flappy Bird, and so using processing I made a imitation, just a very simple imitation of Flappy Bird that I will show in class, probably using my tablet. And thank you.